All right, let's talk about exaggeration today in the context of violin or instrumental practice in general. No demonstrating this time since I just got my second dose and my arm is swollen at the moment, as if a mosquito saw me as an all-you-can-eat buffet with a good deal too. Seriously speaking though, but not really, okay, just enough. This video continues along the theme of practice efficiency and contains yet another tip, and this one's a good one, to help make most effective use of practice time so that in the end I can bounce and get on with other important things I want to do. Netflix. I'm just going to talk about what exaggeration means and different ways it can be useful and applied in the practice room and how. I think you can really break it down into two main areas. So physical exaggeration and musical exaggeration. So the main idea behind how exaggeration could apply in the purely physical sense is, simply put, finding ways to exaggerate the difficulty of a passage you're trying to internalize so that once you get used to these heightened demands, the normal execution of said passage then seems easier. It's like you're pushing past the limit of what's necessary and then working your way down as a way to prepare for, to anticipate, or even attempt to recreate the intense demands of a performance situation. I just find it funny how being on stage, when the adrenaline is rushing and I'm zoned in and hyper aware, and every action, even the tiniest one, seems to have that much more significance and weight behind it. A lot of these things, whether in the mind or reflected in the body, could simply cause me to burn a lot more energy than usual. On the other hand, I'm the kind of person who thrives off the kind of spontaneity and abandon that can result in these kind of onstage situations. After all, I think that's where a lot of the magic can be made. But in the end, I think it's important to be able to always maintain a degree of absolute control over your body or mechanism, to be able to have the choice of how and when to both expend and conserve energy so that you're able to do what you want to do under the pressure of the moment, and that your mind, in the midst of all this stimulation, and exhilaration of the senses, can concentrate solely on the overview of the music. So in practice, I always find it helpful to concentrate on and break down the individual elements or processes that make a passage difficult or uncomfortable in whatever way, and then create exercises that push things into an even further physical extreme. I can immediately give you two specific examples of this, the first of which uses one of my favorite practice tools, something I mention regularly if you've been following Art of Etude or any of my previous videos really, which is working in sharp and uneven rhythms. I'm thinking especially when it comes to fast passages, where you would want to naturally make every note speak with clarity and ease, and in order for that to happen, that the transitions between notes have to be quick. And using uneven rhythms is a great way to exaggerate reactiveness needed for that in both hands. So just imagine, instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at a slow tempo but fast transitions. Instead it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It comes down to the controlled use and release of tension, and always coming back to a relaxed state. The second example is good for stamina's sake and basically speaks for itself. Exaggerate whatever you're doing, whether it's in tempo or dynamic range, etc. So for examples within an example, when it comes to tempo, try pushing to an even faster tempo than what is actually indicated on the score, without muddling the textures, or the opposite, to make something slow even slower, and see what it feels like to be aware of every single moment of the extra slow bow stroke and the resistance, the physical resistance required in maintaining such a slow sustain. And when playing forte, let's say, see what it feels like to push to fortissimo. And same thing when you play something piano as soft as possible or as pianissimo as possible without losing body in the sound. This is a great way to be aware of your own physical limits, the limits of your instrument even, and naturally leads us to the next component, musical exaggeration. Now, the main benefit of musical exaggeration, in the privacy of your own practice room, of course, is, in a sense, to go over the limits so as to know the limits, to make yourself aware of perhaps a previously unknown scope of musical possibilities. You know, how far things can be taken when it comes to the intensity with which a color or a phrasing or an expression in your mind can be translated through the instrument. In a way, yes, it's very much like physical exaggeration, but with an additional layer. Just imagine the beginning of Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto with particular focus on the molto appassionato marking. Now let's think of a few ways we can exaggerate or distort certain elements in the music for the sake of experimentation. How slow a tempo can you take and yet not lose a feeling of urgency? How soft can you play and yet not lose the intensity of the appassionato feeling you'd want to instill? How far can you exaggerate the dynamic range within the arc of a phrase without making things sound unnatural? Or even, how much can you create a sense of contrast and intensity within the phrase, but with as little variation in dynamics and pulse as possible? You see, these questions can go on to infinity, but you get the idea. And all right, that's that. We come to the end of the video. I hope this video was thought-provoking. Good night, and see you next time.